evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Andrew Schneider. I'm president of Logan Square Preservation. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're a 4-decade-old community organization that's been working in this neighborhood. We started by advocating for the Landmark District, and we've since morphed and migrated into doing a lot of additional things. We raise money from local businesses to clear the square right out in front of here of snow every single winter. We have volunteers that are going to plant probably $25,000 worth of trees in our neighborhood, and we generally try and organize the community in a way that results in a better quality of life for everyone who's here. I also want to take a moment to talk about, I should mention, we're a membership-based, all-volunteer organization. If you're interested in joining, it's only $20 a year. You can go downstairs and you get one of these nifty pins that I'm wearing. I also want to talk to you for a moment about the church where we're standing. This is the Norwegian Lutheran Church, the Minnekirken. It's one of only 2 Norwegian language congregations that are left in the United States. It's been here over a century, and this is the second time they've opened up their church to a community meeting in about 6 months. They're really great neighbors. They came in, they turned the heat and the lights on for us. And they've spent a lot of time taking care of this building. They're the only landmark church in our community. They are always working to keep the building up, so if you guys feel like dropping a few nickels in their donation jar on the way out, I'm sure they would very much appreciate it. With that, I want to hand it over to our 35th Ward Aldermanic candidates and A.D. Quigg. A.D.
Hi, everyone. My name's A.D. Quigg. If you're just joining us, I'm a reporter with the Daily Line. We're a morning political newsletter and website. We cover Chicago politics and government. You might remember us from the last election when we were called Aldertrek. So, to talk about the rules again, questions for tonight's forum were collected a few ways. There are questions from me. There are questions from Logan Square residents collected through online submissions over the past month and through submissions from the Logan Square Preservation General Membership. You will be asked to answer each question within 1 minute. At my discretion, I'll give you an extra 30 seconds for rebuttal. If a candidate goes over their time, they will hear the sound of the bell. Lovely. That's the wrap it up bell. Please stick to it. Candidates are asked to stand when giving their opening and closing statements, as well as their answers. We have 1 microphone. Please be courteous in giving it up when your time is through. Audience, again, thank you so much for being here. We did a coin flip, and Amanda U. Dietrich has the opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Amanda U. Dietrich, and I'm running for alderman of the 35th Ward. I'm an immigrant. I grew up in Taiwan under martial law and came to the States when I was 9 years old, not knowing a word of English, and American custom is still something I'm learning about this day. It was my parents' dream to raise their kids in an education system that fosters creativity. It was my parents' dream to raise kids in a society where we are able to speak up. And it is my parents' dream to raise their daughter in a place where her voice matters. When my husband and I got married and we're looking for a place to put down roots and start a family, it was important to us to raise our kids in a culturally rich community. It was important to us to raise our children knowing that being bilingual and being bicultural is normal. And it was important to us that our kids are raised among other immigrant families, just like me. And this is why we chose Logan Square. The vibrancy and life of this community, the street vendors when we first were looking, reminded me so much of my home in Taipei. Communities flourish when we put the work into supporting it. It was through my involvement with Chicago Community Trust Collaboratories, parent engagement in neighborhood schools, being on our local school council, and organizing other blocks for block parties and block clubs that I found my voice. It is necessary that we build a Chicago to be an affordable city, an accessible city, an accountable city. We need affordability for our families by providing affordable housing. We need to improve our accessibility by improving all of our infrastructures. And we need our elected officials to be accountable to us. Oh, I'm sorry. And in order to do that, we need representative who's present in our community and serve us. And I believe I'm up for that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much to Logan Square Preservation for organizing this, all of you for attending. It is such an honor to represent you, to represent our neighborhoods of Avondale, Albany Park, Irving Park, Hermosa, and Logan Square as Alderman of the 35th Ward. I was elected 4 years ago with 67% of the vote on a commitment to put our neighborhoods and working families first, with the support of a grassroots movement that wanted to take on the big and powerful corporations and special interests at City Hall. Together, we said no to Mayor Rahm Emanuel's massive property tax increase. I voted no. And then together we went down there and demanded that we win property tax relief, and we delivered that in the form of $20 million in property tax relief for our most vulnerable families. Together we went down to City Hall and said that we needed a law that would protect our trans sisters and brothers and friends from discrimination and allow them to use the bathroom of their choice. And I'm proud to have been a chief sponsor on the legislation that accomplished that. Together, we went down to City Hall and we said that we needed to ensure that our immigrant sisters and brothers would not face abuse or coercion based upon their perceived immigration or nationality status. And we passed that ordinance. And today in the city of Chicago, it is unlawful for a police officer or a city official to coerce or abuse someone based upon their immigration or nationality status. But our movement didn't just deliver great change at City Hall. We also did amazing things right here in our neighborhood. We brought people together. We united neighbors, we built coalitions, and for the first time in years, we brought a new library to Hermosa to ensure that our children could have a playground and equity, a place where they could play and was safe. Right here in Logan Square, through a coalition that we brought together, we were able to move forward the development of a boutique hotel, and I'm so happy to now report that every party in the community benefits agreement has signed on, and the developer has agreed to pay a living wage in Logan Square of $17 an hour. In Albany Park, we're building multifamily affordable housing developments. In Avondale, we're bringing renovations to the Blue Line. And in Irving Park, we brought together a coalition to build our library after it had burned down, and not just build a new library, but also secure affordable housing for our senior citizens. We've done a lot together in the last 4 years. But I think our greatest accomplishment, I think one of the greatest things that we've been able to do together, is that we spoke up boldly for change at City Hall, and Mayor Rahm Emanuel is not returning. We now have an opportunity, is that time? Okay. Well, I guess I'll say we now have an opportunity to pass legislation we've never been able to pass before. I'm running because of everything we've accomplished and everything we will accomplish now with change that's coming to City Hall. Thank you.
According to figures from Chicago Cityscape, Logan Square saw the highest number of teardowns in 2017, with 109 demolition permits issued. According to DePaul's Institute for Housing Studies, vulnerable populations in these communities are likely undergoing increased housing cost burden or active displacement, and proactive planning is essential to preserving affordability and neighborhood diversity. Ms. Dietrich, what should that planning look like?
I think affordability needs to be addressed on multiple levels. We need to ensure that there are low entry buy-ins in our community, and that includes looking into equitable co-ops. And we need to ensure that we need to look into legalizing coach houses in this community so that long-term residents who may be facing increasing property tax hikes have a way to support that, as well as putting into housing stocks into our community. And most importantly, we need to look into why our city is not affordable right now, and looking at the root cause of it, and looking into legislations that is supporting not just our community, but it's a citywide issue. We are losing population as we speak, and we need to ensure that we have legislations in place to help that.
Alderman Rosa, same question.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. Logan Square has had a record number of teardowns. Planning is essential to preserving affordability and neighborhood diversity. What should that planning look like?
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, right now, our city code doesn't offer us many tools to prevent teardowns. We can attempt to make it a landmark district if it meets that threshold. Unfortunately, under Mayor Rahm Emanuel, we've seen a cut in resources to the landmarking process. I think we need to increase the resources available to the Landmark Commission so that we can landmark more of our historic buildings and preserve them, and therefore prevent them from being demolished. I think another key tool is that we also have to understand how the market works and what incentives are there for developers to demolish things. If something is zoned and it allows you to build up higher and allows you to build to 4, 5, 6 stories, and there's an existing 2-story building there is an incentive to demolish that building so that you can build up. One of the things that we pursued together as a community was downzoning portions of Milwaukee Avenue to create a disincentive to demolish those existing 2- and 3-story buildings. Unfortunately, the chair of the zoning committee, Danny Solis, blocked that with the support of very powerful developers and campaign contributors that give money to both the mayor and Danny Solis. And that's why, again, I'm so excited for the change that's coming to City Hall, because I think that we're going to be able to accomplish a lot that we haven't been able to do in the past, now with a new mayor. Thank you.
Sure. You could have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
While we think downzoning is a great idea, but we need to be thinking about, are we stopping affordable housing from developing in these areas where we should be advocating and working with the stakeholders in having affordable housing that is transit-oriented? Because as we know, most of our families don't rely just on cars, but we rely on our public transportation to have access to our work. So this is something that we need to really think about before we just blatantly downzone all of Milwaukee without really considering what are the after effects of it.
Next question's for you as well. Ms. Dietrich, what are the causes of gentrification in your ward, and what are your proposals for addressing it, as well as increasing affordable housing? For you.
So in the last 4 years, a recent report had just said that Logan Square is one of the fastest gentrifying community, which is heartbreaking for me to see, because one of the reasons why I moved here was because of what this community meant to us. And so in order to address that, I think we need to think about opportunities. We need to ensure that we provide opportunities within our community so that people have jobs, so that we are providing housing stocks, so where when people want to stay, they have that resources to stay, and that we are helping those who are getting displaced, who may be facing displaced, actively helping them to not be displaced. And that means working with our schools, because we all know what it is to have families with kids being displaced in the middle of the school year. And that is really heartbreaking for me to see, especially because I see it every day in my son's school. And that would be something that I would be very committed in doing, in working with our neighborhood schools to bring resources there, and working with our neighborhood groups to ensure that we are outreaching actively and not waiting for them to approach us. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Amanda, you touched upon a lot of the reasons why we as a community are opposed to seeing that displacement of working people, seeing the schools decrease, seeing people kicked out and evicted out of their apartments. I think that what we need to do is we need to build more affordable housing, and we know that the market will not accomplish that. To date, developers that have donated a lot of money to some people in neighboring wards have been able to get a blank check to build whatever they want. And the end result is that they add to a luxury market. The Department of Planning and Development Commissioner Reifman addressed us at the Budget Committee. And I said, look, we're constantly told that we need to upzone, that we need to build more luxury units. Has an analysis been done that says how many luxury units have to be built in Logan Square before we see a corresponding freeze or drop in rents? And he said, oh no, Alderman, we can't study that. There's no way to figure that out. So we're just supposed to blindly allow them to build up and up and up. And that's the argument that we're given to build things like Mika, the Mika Towers, right? Which we know actually leads to a luxury market that further displaces people. So the reality is that the market will not provide us with the affordable housing stock that we need. If we're gonna keep Logan Square diverse, which I think we all want to keep Logan Square diverse socioeconomically and racially, we need to build more affordable housing. I've been pushing the mayor, I've been pushing CHA to accomplish that. I've been working with community groups. Again, we're gonna get it done in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Alderman Rosa, you could take this next one if you'd like. How can economic development be approved along the main business corridors in Logan Square? And what have you done in the past 4 years to improve the business climate here? Yep.
Great, thank you so much. Well, one of the things I'm really proud of, and I hope the Chicago Tribune will endorse me based upon this. So when the Chicago Tribune interviewed me and they endorsed me back in 2015, they said that one of the proposals that they really liked was bringing a boutique hotel to Milwaukee Avenue and to Logan Square. And what we've been able to accomplish through our community-driven zoning and development process is the development of that hotel. So we now have a design that's been approved by community groups. I think some of the developers want to make some tweaks to it. I'm hoping they're not, because then we'd have to go back to the start, because again, everything is community-driven. But what we also have is the $17 an hour jobs that it will provide. And again, what that will do is, one, it'll provide the good jobs that Amanda talked about that help keep people and families in our community. $17 an hour is a living wage for Logan Square. But it will also bring new customers to protect and to expand our retail opportunities along Milwaukee Avenue. So those people that will be coming to that boutique hotel will be able to spend and bring dollars to Milwaukee Avenue. The other thing I'm really looking forward to as well in my next 4 years is working with the Logan Square Chamber of Commerce to explore the concept of an SSA. I think that the SSA will solve a lot of the issues that our commercial corridor has been facing in terms of investment. And again, I think another major thing that will help out is the Bicentennial Improvement Project, which will fix the streetscape along Milwaukee Avenue. And I've been a consistent champion for that project and push CDOT to get us to the point where we are today. Thank you.
Same question. What would you do to improve economic development along Logan Square's main retail corridors?
So one of the things I tend to do when I look at policy is ensure that we look at every policy through lens of equity. Who is bearing the costs and who is seeing the benefits? And that goes with our, that is something I also look at through at our business corridors. I think it's important that we support our local small businesses, and at the same time ensuring that when we build a boutique hotel, we are not sacrificing what is happening in our Emmett Street parking lot, where there's no parking. Where are people gonna park if we do push for an affordable housing for Emmett Street? And I think while I actually do love the idea of the hotel, but I also have to be considerate of providing parking. So with the CDOT that is happening in the traffic circle, which I think it's important, we also have to really think about the impact in this community at large. Who are the population that is going to be affected? And furthermore, our ward is not just this corridor, but I think it's important that we work with neighboring aldermen who also have parts of Milwaukee to ensure that we are supporting small businesses growing cohesively and attracting local economy so that our residents are able to work in this neighborhood.
Could I provide a rebuttal?
Sure, 30 seconds.
You know, I think the Emmett Street parking lot was found to be underutilized by the city. And if you drive by there right now, you will see that there really are no cars parked there. And it's because of that underneath my predecessor, the Metropolitan Planning Council and the city initiated a process to determine what should happen with that site. Hundreds of people participated in person and online, and the number one need that they found that they wanted to be met with that lot was 100% affordable housing there. I've been clear since I was elected 4 years ago that I support that proposal. And we've been working to identify the funds to be able to move that forward. Through our community-driven zoning process, the moment we have everything set up, we will take it back to the community for final approval. Thank you.
Alderman Rosa, this next one's for you. My aldermanic prerogative question. Critics say the power of Chicago City Council members to maintain control over their wards by initiating or blocking city council or city government actions has exacerbated the city's legacy of racial segregation and kept affordable housing developments out of mostly white wards. But aldermen also need to be able to be responsive to their constituents. How can city council change the culture of aldermanic prerogative while still representing what their constituents want? Alderman Rosa, this one's for you.
I keep getting to go first. Okay. The question of aldermanic prerogative, I think, is really a question of how does an individual that is entrusted by the community use the power that they've given by the community? And whether it's the mayor's office making that decision, or a local alderman making that decision, or a community group making that decision, it can still exacerbate inequality. It can still be a racist, classist decision. And so that's why we've coupled community-driven zoning and development in the 35th Ward, which I'm very proud has now become a model that other communities are seeking to implement. It's been researched, it's been studied, it's been used as case studies. That's why we've coupled that with deep grassroots community organizing. So that now the 3 meetings we have had in the 35th Ward to discuss moving forward on an affordable housing project have been well attended, and in each one of those meetings, the community overwhelmingly came together, stood up for our progressive values, and said yes. So I am for having local control. I believe that the community-driven zoning development process that we have developed here that led to things like the boutique hotel, that has led to other developments in our community through a collaborative process, I'd like to see that codified in some way throughout the entire city of Chicago. I don't think that the answer is totally doing away with local control and giving all that power to the mayor, because as we can see, the mayor can also make racist and classist decisions.
Same question. How can city council change the culture of aldermanic prerogative while still representing what constituents want?
So I think it's important we look at affordability in this city. This is not an issue that is just happening in our community. This is an issue happening citywide. So while we have a zoning process in our ward, great. But what about other wards? What about other residents that is being affected, being pushed out of their community? That should be something we all care about as collectively. And I think that in terms of affordable housing, we should be able to require that each ward has affordable housing, and that should not be up to an alderman to decide not pass it and put it up in city council. For me, it's something that is not just happening in this community, and we really need to think about this issue citywide. Again, our population is moving out because the city is not affordable, and we need to build that tax base in order for us to be paying for everything down the future. And this is why we need to begin by making sure we have affordable housing in every community.
Ms. Dietrich, do you support a fully elected school board? And what should the aldermen do to bolster school enrollment?
Yes, of course I support a fully elected school board. I mean, I have kids in CPS school, so I see the problems that's happening. And in terms of aldermen, I think we need to be showing up at our schools when our schools ask them to show up. We need to ensure that we reach out to parents and making sure parents are engaged in our neighborhood schools before their kids are going to our neighborhood schools. This starts at birth. This begins at park activities. This means we help schools to be part of our parks, to be part of our neighborhood communities, because we all know schools are stretched too thin. And this is why, as an elected official representing our community, we need to make sure we are present, that we are showing up at our schools, that we are showing up at parks to talk to parents about our schools. And that is something I intend to do.
So I feel like there was an implication there that I haven't showed up when schools have asked me to show up to events. I have showed up. I have thrown hundreds of events in many different parts of the ward, in every single school in the 35th ward. I have partnered with them to do after-school programs. I've partnered with them to bring them new opportunities. When it comes to school under enrollment, I think we need to think about what is under enrollment. Because when CPS calculates that number, they want to see 30, 35 students per classroom. We can fully fund our public schools if we tax the rich, if we pursue TIF reform. And when we have fully funded public schools, then I think we'll be able to reconceptualize what's actually happening in our schools and say, no, our schools are underutilized. They're not under-enrolled. We actually have space for 20 student classrooms. We actually have space for after-school programs, for music programs, for art programs, for the types of things our children need and deserve.
An elected school board? Alderman? Alderman, you're in favor of a fully elected representative school board?
Oh, of course, yes. Proud to be endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union.
Would you like a rebuttal?
I wasn't given a chance to be endorsed.
Alderman Rosa, we're approaching a sea change in City Hall with a new mayor no matter what. You were an early endorser of Toni Preckwinkle for mayor. If she is elected mayor, how will you hold her accountable to her pledges and to what you want for this ward?
Absolutely. So, I was born in the city of Chicago. I love this city with all my heart and soul. And one of the reasons why I ran is because I was sick and tired of what was happening in City Hall. I was sick and tired of the corruption. I was sick and tired of the double dealing. And I went there, and when I first met with the mayor, I said, look, Mayor Emanuel, if you do things that are in the best interest of my community, I will work. Oh, I'm supposed to stand up. If you do things in the best interest of our community, I will work with you. If you do things that are not in the best interest of our community, I will not work with you. So there are some things where we work together and we pass ordinances, and then there's a lot of other times where I've stood up and been the bold, independent voice. When I met with Toni before endorsing her, I told her I will continue to be that bold and independent voice. If you put forward regressive revenue that hurts our working families, I will vote no. And what she said was, I'm going to pursue TIF reform, I'm going to pursue workman's comp reform, that's going to bring hundreds of millions of dollars to help fund our pensions, to help fund our schools. And then what she also said was, I want to work with you on some specific legislation. And so what we've agreed to work on is removing the carve-outs from our welcoming city ordinance to ensure that we're a true sanctuary, bringing about a fully elected school board, bringing about TIF reform, bringing about an end to the gang database, which the ACLU has ruled unconstitutional. Those are the things that we've agreed to work together. So I'm going to work with her on those good things, but I'm going to continue to be a bold, independent voice standing up for our working families.
Ms. Dietrich, are you supporting anyone in the mayor's race? And how can you hold that future mayor accountable for what you want to see in this ward?
So like any job, we don't get to pick our coworkers. So I'm not supporting any mayor because I think it's important that we are able to work with whoever that's elected for and working together, pushing forward the values that I represent for this community, for the people who live here. And I think that is what it truly means to be the progress part of progressive. And I think that it's important that we, even if there's somebody we don't see eye to eye with 99% of the time, I will work my hardest with that, at that 1% where we do see eye to eye to move a legislation forward because it benefits our community. Thank you.
Can I provide a rebuttal?
Sure. 30 seconds.
So what I will say is that, when we are an elected official, we have to use our voice to stand up for what is right. And while you don't get to choose your colleagues when you're not the boss in a workplace, the reality is that public office is about making decisions. And what I'm hearing right now is that my opponent would not make a decision between Anita Alvarez or between Kim Fox, because she would say, I'm not going to have to decide who I'm going to have to work with, because I'm going to work with whoever's elected. I think that it's totally incumbent upon us to say who we stand with, what our values inform us, is the vision for the city of Chicago we'd like to see, and I believe that Toni Preckwinkle represents that vision, as I believe Kim Fox represented that vision, and that's why I work to elect her.
Would you like a rebuttal? 30 seconds.
I didn't realize I had to pick between Kim Fox or Anita Alvarez, who's not running. So I mean, for me, this is something that I am really focused on this race because I think it's important to be representing the people who will be, who I hope to represent. And, the mayor's race, there's 16 candidates or whatever. And I think that right now, we need to really focus on I think the alderman and I are running for different reasons. I am running because I care about this community. And I think that we need to work with whoever that's elected because ultimately the community suffers if we're not able to pass anything.
Ms. Dietrich, one of the submitted questions we had, what do you think can be done to curb crime in the area, specifically street muggings, carjackings, and drug sales?
Public safety is something that I think we need to approach in multi-level ways. And we need to look at the root cause of what is happening in our city. We have an accessibility issue. We are not funding our schools. We are not providing support for our kids. And we are not doing enough in terms of making sure that we have pre-arrest diversion so that we are reducing crime through other ways in terms of approaching it through public safety. But also we need to start building trust with our police, making sure that they are working within our community for our community, and making sure that we have that they are actually present in our community, walking the street instead of driving in the cars. We need to ensure that our neighbors know one another, because communities can't be built by yourself. It's built because we all know one another, that we are able to help out one another. Because when we do know one another, helping out one another is like instinct. And I think that's why we need to approach it in multi-level ways.
Yeah. The way that we approach crime fighting in the 35th Ward office is two ways. One, it's the local grassroots community work. So I or my staff attend every single one of the CAPS beat meetings in the 35th Ward. When we receive complaints from residents, we connect them with the CAPS beat facilitator, with the local police. We also work to identify problem buildings, because oftentimes we know who's engaging in the carjacking, or we know who's engaging in the gun violence in our community. I'm very proud of the fact that with the 25th Police District, we were able to identify a problem building in West Logan Square, and bringing in the city's building inspector, bringing in the problem buildings officer, we were able to ensure that that building was no longer a source of crime and gun violence in our community in West Logan Square. The other thing that we also have to do, however, is address the issue holistically. That means address the root causes. We know that the best crime fighting strategy is one that fully funds public schools, provides living wage jobs, provides after school programs, and funds our community needs. That's why I've been fighting and fighting and fighting to fully fund our public schools, and to say, look, stop the handouts to the big corporations, stop the silly projects that the Department of Justice says we don't need, and actually invest in our community's needs.
30 seconds.
I think it's funny that the alderman talk about stopping handout to big corporations, because he gave $5.5 million property tax break to Berman Nissan. That is our TIF money that could have gone to our school.
Can I rebut?
30 seconds.
Yeah. So Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the month that I took office, introduced a property tax abatement for Berman Nissan dealership. They were going to take an underutilized site on Kedzie Avenue and turn it into a new car dealership. And it would actually lead to a net positive, if I remember correctly, of $12 million. So the mayor decided to give them that property tax abatement. I was asked whether or not I would support it. In the end, I chose to support it because it was going to provide good union jobs, both in the car porters and in the construction, and because I also turned to community groups like ANA and others and said, how do you feel about this? And they said, we think it's good. In the end, it leads to a net positive. and it wasn't TIF dollars, it was a Class 6B property tax abatement. Again, it was the mayor's ordinance. I was asked whether or not to support it. I turned to the community and decided to do so because the community did, and it provided good union jobs.
Another submitted question, which we touched on a little bit earlier, but I'd like to hear both of you in detail. An ordinance was proposed for downzoning multiple blocks along Milwaukee Avenue. Was this the most effective way to protect the historic character of the neighborhood? And Alderman Rosa, we'll start with you.
Well, I work closely with our community groups. And look, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And I'm not an architect, I'm not a planner, but I also cannot speak for every single person in the community. The only way that you can actually say that you're representative is to listen. And so working with small business owners, working with stakeholders in the community, we did pursue the prospect of landmarking portions of Milwaukee. And the research showed that that was just not going to occur. There weren't enough significant buildings on that portion of Milwaukee west of Kimball where the Landmark Commission would say this can be a historic district, we can protect those buildings. And so that's why then, after the community requested that we engage in downzoning, I introduced the ordinance and also held a very well-attended community meeting. About 150 people or more attended, and the vast majority of people there supported the downzoning proposal. Unfortunately, like I said, that proposal was stopped by Chairman Danny Solis. The Shriver Center for Poverty Law is actually looking into what was happening there and FOIAing some of those documents. Again, I think that it was a good proposal. It's just really unfortunate that the rig system at City Hall stopped our community's voice.
Same question.
The issue is not about downzoning. The issue is about accessibility in our community and working with the buildings. It's not about preservation. It's about working with the property owners to see if we're able to bring more affordable housing along the transit line. And I think that is something that instead of tackling by downzoning, we need to figure out a way where we are bringing in more housing into the important areas where there's accessibility to our buses, to our trains, where there are accessibility to grocery stores. And this is beyond downzoning. And to think that downzoning is something that we can use to squeeze out affordable housing is kind of upsetting. It's upsetting to me.
Can I provide a rebuttal?
30 seconds.
So the downzoning was done because the community requested it. And as we explained, it creates a disincentive for teardowns, right? Because currently, and as we saw closer to Central Park, where the building burned down, remember the FAMSA? FAMSA burned down. Because the downzoning proposal didn't go forward, the community had no say whatsoever when it was built there. And then my office got complaints from people saying, we don't like what's being built, we don't like the fact that it's gonna be 4 or 5 stories, Alderman, do something about it. If the downzoning had been in place, that developer would have had to come back to us through our community-driven zoning and development process and ask and take an input. But furthermore, that would have then triggered the affordable housing set-aside. So this is the manner in which downzoning actually promotes affordability and leads to that 20% that my opponent and I have both talked about that we support.
Alderman Rosa, of the ethics reforms proposed in the days since Alderman Ed Burke's court appearance, which do you support?
So I was very proud to stand with my Progressive Caucus colleague, Scott Waguespack, yesterday at Chicago City Hall. The Progressive Caucus put forward a wide-ranging number of reforms we would like to see. One of those that I personally would like to see is ensuring that the Chicago City Council chooses its chairs, not the mayor. And I want to make sure that Pat O'Connor, who has been Ed Burke's buddy and has been working side by side with him for decades, does not become our new Finance Committee chair. I believe that Scott Waguespack should become our new Finance Committee chair. Let me hear a round of applause if you're for that too. But in addition to that, I think that we need to change Rule 14. We need to make sure, because Ed Burke all the time would stand up and be like, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote. But in every other portion of that ordinance, he was involved behind the scenes. He was involved in the committee process. So we really need to make sure that if someone has a conflict of interest, that they're not involved whatsoever, and that at the onset, at the moment that the ordinance or the benefit is introduced to the Chicago City Council, that the council is already made aware of that conflict of interest, so it doesn't get to the point where at the end of the process, then Alderman Burke says, actually, I can't vote on this, when he's actually been ushering it along the entire way.
Same question.
So I signed a People's Pledge today, and that means that I believe we need transparency in our finance committee. It means that, we need to ensure that people who are elected officials don't have second jobs. And it means that aren't running for other offices while we're in our current job. Because God knows, it's a
Tap it. Oh. Okay. A little improvising.
I'm sorry. It means that, we should be running for the office we want. And that is what I intend to fully do if I'm elected, because this is something that I think is very important, that our elected officials are doing the job that they're elected to, and that we are being very transparent and accountable for the job that we're elected to. Thank you.
Can you hear me back? Great. Alderman Rosa, do you want to respond? You've run for lieutenant governor this year and also ran for Congress. Do you see that as problematic?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pledge that my opponent signed, which I support every single one of those things on there, what it actually says is that you will not run for two positions at the same time, which is something that I have not done. So I support every single one of the planks on on the People First pledge. But what I will say is that in the private sector, people get recruited all the time. And the only reason that I ever ran for lieutenant governor was because progressive community groups, because progressive labor unions, because Daniel Biss came to me and said, I want you to be my lieutenant governor running mate. And what I saw to do was an opportunity to advance the very things that brought me into government, which is change our society for the better. To raise our voices up for Medicare for all, raise our voices up for fully funded public schools, raise our voices up for taxing the rich. Unfortunately, we had a disagreement on one particular issue that did not relate to the bread and butter issues of the people of the state of Illinois, and so that meant that we couldn't continue on as a ticket. And when Congressman Luis Gutierrez announced that he would not be seeking re-election, again, hundreds of people came to me via online messages, through Facebook, via Twitter, and said, we want you to run. And they recruited me to run for that office. And hundreds of people came out and knocked doors with me. And again, I did it to advance the causes of this community, to advance the causes of working people. So I want to say that I'm proud that people recruited me. And I think that people in this community should also be proud that we have an alderman that others are seeking to have represent them as well. Thank you.
Alderman Rosa, did you have any problem with Toni Preckwinkle running for Cook County Board President at the same time as she was running for mayor?
I don't think that was the case. The election was in November. When did she announce?
She announced after. It was pretty clear that she was running.
Okay.
Did you find it problematic at all?
Well, I mean, I think I've signed that pledge not to do that, right? I'm making that pledge. Again, I think that'd be a question for Toni Preckwinkle. Yeah.
Did you want a rebuttal?
It's great that other people may want Alderman Rosa in other offices, but at what cost to our community? I am running for office, and I understand how not present I am to my family, and I can't imagine running for two offices while in one office and being present in our community. Like, there are not 6 of us. There's only 1 of you.
Alderman, what do you believe has been the most significant contribution your tenure as alderman has brought to Logan Square and to the city?
I think that our community-driven zoning and development process is really a testament to how we can democratize decision-making, how we can make sure that everyone, especially the most marginalized, have a seat at the table, how we can build a community when there's so many competing interests. Our community-driven zoning and development process brought together groups that in the past we were told were in contention with one another. It brought together Logan Square Neighborhood Association, it brought together Logan Square Preservation, it brought together people that weren't associated with any organization. And consistently, developers and attorneys that come to this community say, wow, Alderman, you have the best meetings possible. So look, Logan Square is a community that's gonna face a lot of challenges. It's faced a lot of those challenges already as a result of the development that's been happening. And I feel confident that if the community-driven zoning development process that's present here in the 35th Ward, we're present in the rest of Logan Square, in the 1st Ward, we're present in the parts of Logan Square where our residents feel like they don't have a voice, that Logan Square would look very different today than what it looks like right now. And I feel like a lot of people feel like in other parts of Logan Square, like in the 1st Ward, we're heading in the wrong direction. And so I'm really proud of having a process here in the 35th Ward that other people across the city say is a model that they want to implement for their communities.
I did a quick Google. Couldn't remember off the top of my head. Tony Preckwinkle announced on September 20th, and the election was in early November.
Thank you.
In case you all wondered. Ms. Dietrich, what do you think are the biggest opportunities in the 35th Ward for growth and development? What do you want to do with your 4 years as alderman?
Wow, there's so many. And I think first and foremost, I want to ensure that our families who wants to stay here gets to stay. And that means that we are working with our neighborhood associations, working with small landlords, working with big landlords, in making sure that we are providing affordable housing. And second, it's small businesses. It really saddens me that I walk around Milwaukee, I walk around our Irving Park, just all over our community, even in Hermosa, that there are a ton of empty storefronts. And, in order to attract that, we need to start working at making sure we beautify our sidewalks, making sure that we have green spaces, making sure that we are working with the starting business chambers if there is not one in Hermosa, and working with other neighboring aldermen in making sure that, and community members of those neighborhoods, in making sure that we are coming up with a cohesive vision together to attract the right businesses into our community. And schools. I want to make sure that our schools are fully funded and that we are providing resources and looking at community school model, because I think it's important that our schools aren't just supporting the students, but the families that go to there, so that we're not continuing displacing everybody.
Alderman Rosa, tax increment financing is a public financing method that is used as a subsidy for redevelopment, infrastructure, and other community improvement projects. Chicago TIFs generated a record $660 million in revenue in the 2017 tax year, a $99 million increase over last year. What is your position on the use of TIFs in Chicago and potential reforms?
Thank you. I'm proud of the fact that I introduced the first TIF reform measure of the current term of the Chicago City Council that helped reinvigorate a conversation that needs to be had about the use of TIF funds in our city. TIFs were initially created to be an economic development tool. But the studies that I have looked at extensively at the use of TIF in the Midwest have found that they're primarily a way to balkanize our city budget. So when you have a TIF in the Central Business District or in the Western Loop, it keeps that money there. It means that money from downtown, it means that money from that affluent area can't leave there and be invested in the West Side or the South Side. So I support ensuring that we reform our TIF system, that we do an audit of our existing TIFs and figure out what projects really are contractual agreements that need to be met, and which funds are just being held there so the mayor at some future point in time can use it as a piggy bank. I also want to see TIFs abolished in our central business district and in the Western Loop. So if we go through that process and we reform our TIF system, that will free up hundreds of millions of dollars for our public schools and for community needs. But lastly, while we have the status quo, what I have done is said, let's use that TIF for affordable housing, let's use that TIF and surplus it for our Chicago public schools, and I'm happy to have led the effort amongst Logan Square aldermen for the main TIF in our community, where I got all of us together to send a letter to the mayor and to the then budget director asking for those funds in that TIF to be surplus to go to our neighborhood public schools. Unfortunately, the mayor didn't listen.
Same question.
I think TIF reform is important, and that begins with transparency. I think it's important that we actually know what TIFs are in our district, and that our residents doesn't need to search or dig deep to find it. So that is something that I would fully intend to put on the ward's website, in how it's been spent and what the money is budgeted for. But second of all, I think when we think about TIF, we really need to think about who are these TIFs for? Are they creating something that is for the developers that is coming into our community to build? Or are they being created because we are really looking for incentives for our community? Is it creating more segregation in our community, or are we really looking for surpluses that goes back to our community? I mean, these are all questions. I don't believe in creating TIFs that pockets the lines of the wealthy, because they have the money to pay for it themselves already. And I think that we also need to think about TIF, because all of these changes that Alderman Rosa wants needs to be passed in the state level, because the state actually passes TIF. So it's about making sure we work with other officials instead of introducing ordinances, but actually passing them, and making sure we are building a coalition and advocating through our network to pass these reforms. Thank you.
It is now closing statement time. Ms. Dietrich, you get to go first. You have 2 minutes. You opted to go last from the coin flip, right?
I just want to thank all of you guys for staying for such a long night. And I'm running because I think belonging, the feeling that we belong, is the foundation of an inclusive community. When our elected officials are not showing up, when they are not answering our calls and our emails, when they're not present in our community, they are telling us that we do not belong, and that undermines our community. Now more than ever, I think we need to know that we matter and we belong. It is necessary for immigrants to have a seat at the table, because I know firsthand what it feels like to have a tape over my mouth, because I'm too afraid that if I speak too loud, I will get unwanted attention. It is necessary for women and women of color to have a seat at the table. In a city with over 60% women, there are only 13 women city council members out of 50. And it is necessary for mothers to have a seat at the table, because I'm running for all of our kids' future, and I see every day the struggles of our working families. It is necessary that we have a representative who is willing to do the work and show up and represent our community. I am running for the job I want because I believe in giving back to this community that has given me so much, and where we have roots, where we are raising our children, where we know we will live here forever. So I hope to get your vote February 26th. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for being part of this process. Thank you, all of you, for attending this wonderful forum this evening. You know, I know that there are some people that are mad at me for taking some bold progressive stances. I know that there are some people that want to use this election to punish me for standing up to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. But I'm proud of the stances I've taken. And I'm proud to have been a bold and independent voice for our working families at City Hall. The only way to not get people angry at you is to not take any bold stances, is to not make any decisions, to go along to get along. But I didn't run for office to go along to get along. I ran for office because our nation and our city are in crisis, and our working families desperately need someone that's going to stand up and fight for them every single day. That's what I've done for the last 4 years as your 35th Ward Alderman. Going down to City Hall and saying no to Mayor Rahm Emanuel's massive property tax increase, yes to property tax relief for our most vulnerable families. Going down to City Hall and fighting alongside my colleagues to fully fund our public schools, to make sure that we have investment in our communities and not a system that benefits Mayor Rahm Emanuel and Ed Burke's buddies. If you look at all the lists that have been coming out lately, there's all these lists coming out. So there's a list that came out that said aldermen that didn't get money from Ed Burke, campaign contribution-wise. Aldermen that got an A in equity from the Center for Racial and Gender Equity, for pushing forward racial and gender equity. Aldermen that voted against the Cop Academy and that stood up for, criminal justice reform. Aldermen that voted to empower the Office of the Inspector General and ensure that, Ed Burke was able to be investigated by the Office of Inspector General, and who was the minority that voted for that. And then there was another list of aldermen. There was a study that came out and said aldermen that have, models of transparency in their wards when it comes to local decision making. I'm really proud, and I think we should all really be proud, that the 35th Ward is the only ward that had an alderman on every single one of those lists. These are difficult times. There are no easy answers. I'm a human being. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm sorry, making St. Louis a two-way was a mistake. But you know that my commitment will always be for our working families, and that I will always stand up and always speak boldly. I want to thank you all for your support, and it's going to be an honor and privilege to continue to serve you for 4 years. Thank you.
Well, that's our evening. I want to say thank you to the candidates, all the candidates for coming out tonight. Round of applause for our candidates. Round of applause for our fantastic moderator, A.D. Quegg. And a round of applause for the Minikirkin for hosting us this evening. Thank you, everybody.